Greetings to all C3RF friends and members across Canada and indeed around the world as we kick off another session of In Hot to discuss the Allison Inquiry into the status of the vaccine injured in Canada. The topic is a hot one, with recent revelations that the safety and effectiveness of the COVID vaccinations may have been misrepresented by the authorities like Anthony Fauci, for example, that we trusted to tell us the truth regarding such critical public health issues. Our very special guest today is none other than Member of Parliament Dean Allison, who has chosen to break the shackles of secrecy that surround the vaccine injury file to stand up an Allison inquiry dedicated to getting some long called for answers. With him, we are also very pleased to welcome Teresa Buckley, who serves as the inquiry's organizing and coordinating officer. By way of introduction, Member of Parliament Allison has been the long-standing Conservative Party representative for Niagara West since 2004. He is a graduate of Wilfrid Laurier University with a degree in economics. Dean established himself in the Niagara and Hamilton area through working for a major franchise organization and eventually starting and running a number of successful businesses in Southern Ontario. For her part, Teresa has performed in yeoman fashion as the overseer of operations for the groundbreaking National Citizens Inquiry into Canada's COVID pandemic response. Welcome to In Hot, Dean and Teresa. It's a great pleasure to have you on board. And I have to start off by asking, this is dangerous territory that you've ventured into. A lot of people don't like it. And I got to ask, what motivated you to stand up the enterprise? And I'll start with you, Dean.
Yeah, so listen, as a member of parliament, there's a couple things we do fundamentally. We do lots of things, but two things we do is we listen to people and we help them obtain government programs that are available. And we do that all the time, every day. And, you know, I can't think back to during COVID when people were required to get a vaccination, either to travel or keep their job or stay in school or visit grandma. And, you know, it just never really sat very well with me. I thought that, you know, people should have a choice at the very least on those things. And people used to call crying. I mean, I had a lady call me in third year of nursing and said, I've just spent 3 years of my life and thousands of dollars. And now they're saying if I don't get a vaccine, I will not be allowed to continue the program. The other example I give, and I could give you hundreds, I'm just going to give you two, was a trucker who was in his early 60s and needed the job to drive and put food on his table. Also had had some issues with vaccines in the past in terms of allergic reactions. He said, like, I don't feel good. This is not going to be good, but they're not giving me an option. So this never sat well with me. I didn't like this. I thought people should have choice on these issues, and I said so at the time. So nothing's changed in terms of my thought process on that. But fast forward a little bit, and not even that far after that, we had individuals that were getting injured. Once again, the same people, maybe different people, but people calling my office and saying, listen, I've been injured, and what can be done, et cetera, et cetera. And, you know, I find it very, strange to me that as a member of parliament, I can hear people's stories in private, but as soon as we start talking about these things publicly, there's the hush that comes across the whole country. And so it hasn't been sitting well for me for a number of years. And quite frankly, I've always thought I'd like to help tell people, help tell their stories. And one fateful day, I don't think it was fate. I think it was all organized. Sean and Teresa showed up in my office to talk about natural health products. And they were supporting a member of parliament who had a private member's bill. And not only were they supporting him, they'd actually crossed the country in support of this private members bill to make sure that it happened and people are being educated. And so we were there to talk about natural health products. I was vaguely aware that they had been involved with the NCI, National Citizens Inquiry, for those people that don't know our acronyms. And so I was aware of some of the work they had done, but not completely. And so someone had introduced us. They said, you should pop by to talk about natural health products. And I said, hey, this has been on my hard mind for some time. And quite frankly, I think that we should have a discussion about that. So I don't know what Teresa will have to say. She may have a different recollection of it, but I think it was tough because we originally said, and I'll maybe turn it over to her for some thoughts. I said, listen, this is a tough topic to talk about. No one wants to talk about it. And I'd ask you to go out and see if you can find even one or other, find me one person that would actually sit at the table when we start listening to these people. And so I'll turn it over to Teresa and let her tell you how that went.
Okay, Teresa, yes, indeed, and maybe a little bit of background on how you got motivated to to join the program and help Dean stand it up?
Well, I think I would probably tie it right back to when I started volunteering with the National Citizens Inquiry. Sean had been volunteering in the background. This was before the hearings actually started back in February of 23.
Yeah.
And dusk to dawn, realized that he was preparing all of the witnesses, starting the groups, preparing the organization, working with the countless other volunteers that had also signed up. But there had been a lack of social media presence. So he had gotten to the point where I believe we're going to be able to do this, but who's going to know? How is this going to get out? So I have a background in marketing, and I had watched and listened for several months at that stage in the background, kind of chirping like our birds, which I usually do with Sean. Dean's laughing now. So I had told him, I said, I'll give you one day. I said, I will give you one day. And so what I arranged to do was to get some friends from church, and we had a videographer come over, and I had taped some interviews of people just asking why they felt that Canadian voices needed to be heard regarding the government's response to COVID-19. And that was the one day. So I had started producing content there, and that one day just kind of evolved into 3 years. So one day at a time.
The longest day.
The longest, yeah, and I'm still on that day. And I negotiate with my husband every single morning. So we have
your husband, Sean, by the way, he's a constitutional lawyer, and I must say I've seen many of the products that the National Citizens Inquiry put out. Your videos, compelling. I mean, the testimonies are absolutely compelling, and a lot of them really bring a tear to the eye, because there's some stories out there that are just really an abomination. Basically, what happened to some of these people, and I'm so glad to see that you and Dean are picking this up. But as I said, you're stepping into some pretty dangerous territory, and I'm already seeing the talking heads on mainstream media start to try to discredit you. Just on one major network the other day, I saw two chaps, pundits, political activists, basically calling anybody involved in the project to be tin hat conspiracy theorists. Very very insulting, as a matter of fact. I mean, you would think that they'd have some sort of I don't know, whatever for the people who suffered so, but they had none at all. And and then we have actual members of parliament actually coming out and saying that, trying to discredit you by saying that you're not balanced, because you shouldn't just be talking to the vaccine injured. You should be talking to the people who were cured or saved by the vaccine. So what do you have to say to these pundits and other critics? Maybe, Dean, I'll start with you.
Yeah, so I think therein lies the example. Absolutely zero empathy, right? Zero empathy for those that were injured. The arrogance is just over the top, and therein lies the challenge about why we can't have these conversations. When we were talking, there was another MP that also put out a video called Mark Gerritsen, and he sort of led us to believe that maybe people weren't actually really injured. So think about that for a second. People have got horrific stories to tell, and they're actually doubting whether these people. So why would you want to come forward with your story if this is the typical response? And so I think one of the reasons we're doing is we want people to have permission to tell their stories publicly. There's no way healing can begin. There's no way that people can feel a sense of community. There's no way that anyone is ever going to be able to move on if you're just constantly ignored. And so, what I find interesting and is that we also had a doctor on the other side, a liberal doctor, that said we were actually, creating vaccine hesitancy, et cetera, et cetera. And, were people really were people really injured? I'm thinking your own government, through the Vaccine Injury Support Program, acknowledges that people got injured. I mean, it
Yes.
doesn't get any simpler than that at the end of the day. And so, according to public health records, and we know that the numbers are much higher because we've had doctors at our press conference our last press conference that talked about how they were being censored and not allowed to talk about and not having a hard time filling out the forms, etc. And so we know by government's own numbers, over 60,000 people have been injured, and that 11,000 have been very serious. 3,500 people had actually applied to the Vaccine Injury Support Program, of which only 3,000 were accepted, and only 252 out of 60,000 people actually received any kind of compensation. This is absolutely horrific and a travesty of justice. And so if you look at those numbers at 0.4% of the total vaccine injured, and we know there's more, as I said, let's just talk about the people that have been identified by Health Canada. I think this is absolutely horrible. So, I'll go back to why we did this. First of all, we want to give people permission to speak publicly. Because if they can't talk about it, they always fear they're going to be gaslit. They're going to just stay hidden in their homes. And the second thing is, and I alluded to that before, my job is to help people as a member of parliament access government programs. And so we want to make sure we do that as well. And I would like, if there's more time later, to talk about what a disaster that initial vaccine injury support program has actually been. But I think we'll give Teresa a chance to share a few thoughts as well.
Yeah, Teresa, I think your husband Sean in the 13 August presser came out and said that the thing he found disturbed people most was the fact that they had no one to talk to, they had no one that would listen, and they felt they were being gaslit. Your comments on that?
We knew that it was going to be difficult marching forward to listen to the stories. We had no idea the level of hurt and abandonment that these people are feeling.
Yeah, boy.
Not only physically suffering themselves, but the emotional abuse on top of everything. Like we have these forms for the witnesses to apply. We have the first form that they fill out. It's just a cursory form. And once they fill that out, then they're sent the secondary form. We had people contacting us back, really struggling with filling out that form because it reminded them of constantly having to go back to the doctors.
Does it seem like the form was itself an obstacle to progressing a case?
That the form was a trigger to the trauma that they had received.
Okay.
So it was a reminder of what abuse. So not only have these people, like, regardless of why you took the vaccine to begin with, that's not what's here. What we're doing is we're listening to the people that are injured. They're victims.
Yes.
Like, I think the word injured is actually the wrong word now. And we just this was placed on our heart a few days ago. I think the word we need to start using is actually victims.
Wow. Okay.
COVID-19 vaccine victims. And to pretend that they're injured is almost milquetoasting what it is that's happened. Because not only have they been injected with something that has forever changed their makeup of how they physically feel now for the rest of their lives, it's shortened their lifespan, probably. But they've also then experienced the abuse on top of it. And that is what has been coming back. Sean would ask the question, what's the worst thing that is as a result of this? What's the worst thing? And 9 times out of 10, they're speaking about the conduct that they had received from the medical system.
It seems like it's almost it's hard to fathom because you look at Canada's response to public health problems in the past, things like the swine flu of 1976. There were some people came down with Guillain-Barré disease. Some 30 to 50, I think, died in the program. and boom, it was immediately pulled. They backed right out of it, no problem. The tainted blood scandal of the 80s. I mean, we had a whole full-blown Krever Commission to look at the problems and make sure the same thing didn't happen again. But with this particular product, with this particular situation, it seems like there's all the effort is being put into covering up. I'll give you an example. Dean, maybe you can comment on this example, but when a government takes the vaccine injury data, which would help you guys out a lot, when they take that and put it in a medical lockup for 15 years, what do you say? What can you say about that?
Well, I mean, that's been the greatest challenge that we've seen with this government in general. And it could be any government, right? Let's be honest. Transparency is key, right? I find it interesting they had a scoreboard during COVID that listed the deaths and this and that all through COVID, but yet they've done such a terrible job in actually collecting data. And yeah, I think, fair and reasonable people would say, listen, let's look at the data and see if we need to make midterm corrections. Let's have a conversation about what's happened. And I think that's what's been missing sorely. You think about some 30 countries around the world, including G7 countries and OECD countries, and a lot of developing countries have had some type of inquiry, and we've had absolutely zero on that issue. And as Teresa said, our primary, what we're doing is listening to people, giving them permission to tell their stories publicly, and trying to go to bat for them. There's so many other things we could talk about. We could talk about the fact that we lost over 115,000 kids that exited the education system during COVID across this country. Think about what that did to them. We could talk about a vaccine, the science around, just so many things that we could talk about, but we're limited by time and we're limited by resources. And so we felt, and I certainly felt, and what I talked to Sean and Teresa about was I felt that as a member of parliament, I am allowed to talk to people and I'm allowed to go to bat for them. So don't tell me that I can't do that publicly. And if you're telling me that I can't do it publicly, now you're trying to gaslight me. And I don't appreciate that very much. And as a matter of fact, I think, when we start to shed a light on what's going on, I hope that's going to encourage other people to say, oh, I didn't know, or, oh, I'd like to have more information. I go back to the Vaccine Injury Support Program. Literally $55 million in the program that was given, run by a third party, Oxarrow, and then over 35 million of the 55 million went to overhead and
Wow.
not to actual victims. That is ridiculous. And you know who told us about that? It wasn't a government inquiry. It wasn't actually a committee having a conversation. It was a bunch of independent journalists. A lady by the name of Tamara Ugolini, who was doing freedom of information requests to help put the story together, and then Global News ran it. Like, think about that for 1 second. If it wasn't for guys like you, men and women like you doing independent journalism, we would still not even know what a disaster that was. And so if you think about that, like I said, 35 million out of 55, two-thirds of the money went to overhead. It was absolutely ridiculous. So I hope as well, we'll encourage the government to also refund that program, increase the funding. And I could talk about, and hopefully you'll ask us a little bit later about the process that people have actually tried to go through to actually get signed up for the program. Talk about re-traumatizing.
Well, talk about the other thing that we're really kind of dipping our toes into here is something called responsible government, because if you are being discouraged from doing your job as a representative of the people of Niagara West or whatever riding, if you're being discouraged from doing that, then that is a swipe at our responsible government, where we're supposed to, as citizens, have the right to be represented. This is crazy. And the other thing is, I'm thinking that this whole thing seems to have been offshored. Our response, Canada would never, on its own billet, I think, go ahead and do what it did with COVID. If it just done it on its own, we had plans prepared and in place to handle epidemics and influenzas and all the rest of it. And I think one person that springs to mind is Colonel Dave Redmond. He's an emergency manager of par excellence, and he said the country stepped away from everything that was in place to handle this, and instead we seem to offshore everything to the World Health Organization and follow their lead. It's absolutely incredible. And what really bothers me is we're stepping away from responsible government here, and we just can't ask questions, and that's just not right.
Russ, it's about sovereignty too, right? When you start deeming, you got all these international organizations, you start ceding your responsibility, you start ceding what is yours as a sovereign nation. You're looking for trouble, and I'm a big fan of David Redmond, as I've had him on my show before. I've talked to him, and you're right. We had pandemic responses, emergency response, and he should know something because he was in charge of that in Alberta, and it was also something he did in his career, as you're well aware. We had all these responses across the provinces and nationally, and we threw them out the window. We didn't even look at them, and we didn't put in charge who should have been in charge. We destroyed the economy. We destroyed people's lives financially, and the list goes on and on. And like I said, we've had zero response. There's been no one looking or doing anything. So I think what Teresa, Sean, and I hope that we can do is just shine a little bit of light on a very tiny part of this. So much more needs to be done. Like I said, we do not have the budget, and we certainly don't have the mandate to be able to do that. But what we can do is listen to people, and we go to bat for them for the programs they're actually entitled to.
Indeed, and I like the idea of getting the information out. I think, Teresa, I think this is probably your work, but I'm going to share a screen here. I want to go to your website. I want to take a look at that. And up front, here's your website, Allison Inquiry. And you can apply to be a witness. You can sign up. This is where you go. It's basically Google Allison Inquiry, and you got it. But I want to go to the exhibits because I was looking through your site, and you have a Rule 25, which states that you can put up on the web here on your site anything that you feel, any information you feel is appropriate. And I want to go down to, I think it's this one right here.
Yeah, the Pfizer.
Yeah, this is a report from Pfizer. And if I go find 1223, I come up with this figure here. And this is a general overview, selected characteristics of all cases received during the reported interval. And this interval is the first 3 months of the vaccine rollout. And it's saying here that the fatal, the records of fatalities is 1,223 after 3 months. Now, this kind of information is not getting out to the public, and I'm wondering, Teresa, this is that your bailiwick there? That whole Rule 25 thing and putting stuff up?
Yes, and what we see with MP Dean Allison is an opportunity to get through to a different audience to educate them as to what has happened and what was actually in place. People don't know this information, but they're starting to understand. Like they're starting to see that there is something wrong. I just like to give an example about a colleague of mine contacted me saying he had cancer and autoimmune issues, and he's now losing his eyesight.
Oh.
I hadn't commented to him on what I felt may be the cause, but he said, Teresa, I think it might be from the COVID-19 vaccine. And I said, oh, really? And he said, they're actually having an inquiry on it in Ottawa in the fall. And there was something in that moment with him understanding that there was someone in a position of authority discussing something that was already kind of placed on his heart. It was like the connection was there. And so we're hoping with this Rule 25 documents that are coming out as well, that that'll be another opportunity to educate the common Canadian that doesn't have access to this information. And it really is, what media source do you watch? Do you watch mainstream media or do you watch alternative media? So the more eyes we can get onto the Allison Inquiry, we'll be able to give them just the data, right? We're not going anywhere other than just This is what it says in the rules. You can read it for yourself. You can go on the government websites and you can find this information yourself. But there's something about listening to Canadians, listening to the voices of Canadians as they all get up there on swearing on the Bible to tell the truth with their wheelchairs and their IV poles.
Wow.
All of those critics can say whatever it is that they want. As far as I'm concerned right now, the more they speak about it, the more eyes will be on what it is that we actually are going to do. And all we're doing is we're just hosting. We're hosting people and giving them an opportunity to share their stories while MP Dean Allison and whoever else joins him listens.
Most certainly, Teresa, people, deserve the data. They deserve the information. It's their government. It's their public health organization. They deserve it all. For it to be locked up for 15 years, I don't know. That sounds kind of like a bad deal. And it also sounds like the lip service they're paying to vaccine injuries is, if anything, token at best. We're talking about 55% of the injury funding going to overhead, as Dean stated. That's I'd like to see an audit on that. Two-thirds, a forensic audit, please. We need something like a forensic audit. I also going to ask this: you're not in this alone, really. When you look at the worldwide situation, there's a lot happening in other countries. We're looking south of the border. We've got Senator Ron Johnson has his Senate hearings. We've got Rand Paul, who's basically uncovering a lot of very interesting information to the diaries of Dr. Fauci. Is there any thought there, maybe this is for Teresa again, about as your job of communications and organization, of reaching out and linking up with these other outfits to make an international push on getting vaccine injury information out?
Well, I've always felt on my heart that the way to wake up Canada is through the United States. I always felt we needed to come through the border from the south, pushing it to the north.
Isn't that unfortunate? Yes.
Now I actually feel it may be going the other way with what we're doing with the Allison Inquiry. Because it's there's something about when you see other people showing courage. The courage itself is contagious. So again, I think the more people globally that can speak about what their experiences are, it validates. Just like my friend, when he heard about the Allison Inquiry on global news, he was validated for what it was that he felt in his heart.
Yes, yes, indeed. And I think unfortunately, the foundations of a democracy are really its watchdog press, and I don't think our mainstream media is doing the job that it's supposed to be doing as a professional outfit. No, it does seem to be up to the little guys, the independents, guys like C3RF and others. But that's very unfortunate. But I got a feeling at the end of the day, it's going to be much more powerful than what anything that providing information and anything the legacy media could give us. Just my opinion. But I have another question about injury, and we're talking about physical injuries here. Some of them are horrendous. Actually, to the point where some of them are being advised that maybe they want to consider MAID and euthanasia. It's absolutely incredible. But we also have people who have been injured monetarily, economically. You had on your August 13 presser, you had Dr. Charles Hoff. I've interviewed him a couple of times myself on these in-hot sessions. Very, very interesting man and a very brave man. But he was injured. He was injured through basically being pilloried and taken to tribunal after tribunal to take his license away. Are you looking at, when you're looking at injuries, are you looking at that side of it as well, or just the physical? Dean, maybe I'll go to Dean.
Yeah. So listen, what we're trying to do is really hear about the physical injuries, but I think it's important for context. That's why the good doctor was there at the press conference. I don't think people understand how difficult it is to actually register an injury in this country. He talked about at the press conference 9 pages he needs to fill out
Wow.
just to register there's an injury with BC and BC Health. Think about that for a second. That's not the injury support program. That's a different form altogether. He doesn't get paid for that. And after he filled out literally 14 of these injuries, 9 pages, and think about the time that that ties up in his practice and how he's not compensated for that, they were all rejected. So think about a doctor that's been in where he was, Linton in BC,
Yes.
for almost 30 years. He's got a First Nations community, almost over 1,100 people, knows these people intimately, knew their parents, the kids, knew their health and where they were at. So he would know. And after the vaccine, I saw a dramatic change, probably fit the bills of what was shown to be side effects, filled out the forms, and then had them all rejected. I think he said if my memory serves me correctly, Russ, that, maybe up to 30, maybe 27, 28 these cases. And he said literally after a period of time, he just gave up on trying to fill the forms out because they kept getting rejected. So you think about that. And then when he spoke up against that, he was heavily censured and almost lost his license. If it hadn't been, as his words, a very solid lawyer that represented him, 8 expert testimony, expert witnesses on certain issues, what would have happened? He may be
Yeah.
what there have been doctors all across the country that have lost their licenses for speaking. Once again, I think you would know
Yes.
that. You probably had some of them on your show. And
I
that's what,
did.
and so that's the challenge. The challenge is that not only can we not have a conversation, but if someone tries to have a conversation, you'll be canceled or the threat will be canceled. And so you take a look at that doctor and you think about what happened to Dr. Charles Hoff. And so another doctor watching that is, what are they going to do? Are they going to stand up and take a chance of the 12 plus years of education they had to go through to ruin their livelihood? I completely understand. I can't say, well, why would they just stand up? I get it. The threat of losing your livelihood and something you've trained over a decade for is very troubling. And so that's what we're fighting in this country, Russ. And I think that's why we got to have these conversations. The threat of censorship is growing in this country. It's not
Yes.
receding. And if we can't talk about this stuff, then guess what? They're going to tell us what we can talk about. And every time they decide we're not allowed to talk about these kinds of things, guess what's going to happen? We're not going to have those conversations. So we can never get to the bottom of it. We can never get to these other stories. As we mentioned at the outset, there are lots of things we could be talking about during this inquiry. You hit
Oh,
the
yeah.
nail on the head of another one. And those are the people that lost their jobs as a result of the decisions that they made. But as I said, we're going to remain focused on a very small subset. But what we're hoping we'll do is facilitate a conversation for another day where people will continue to say, you know what, now I feel like I can talk about this publicly because finally someone has actually talked about it in Parliament. So that should give me the license to be able to, and the permission to have these conversations.
Yeah. Perhaps the dam is about to break with your initiative, Dan and Teresa. I've interviewed pilots and doctors in hot sessions that have lost their jobs, very high-paying jobs. One doctor, Dr. Mary O'Connor, she was a doctor of a GP of some 60 years here in Ottawa. Oldest, established, never faulted for her practice, and she lost her license because she gave out one too many exemptions, I believe, was her problem. The College of Physicians and Surgeons of Ontario, they put out during the course of COVID, they put out a release saying that perhaps doctors should think about offering their patients psychotherapy if they refuse or don't think the shot is such a good idea. These colleges, what the heck is going on with that? I mean, that's not their job to get into the middle of in between a patient and a doctor. That's not their job at all. But and then you have misinformation. You said there's so much every day. There's more and more censorship, and it seems to be coming down to they're building these misinformation laws that I can see being turned around on people who talk about things like this. And all of a sudden, you're captured under Bill C8 or Bill C9, hate legislation, and off goes your career and your economic prospects by being dragged into the court by the government. Absolutely incredible. It's dystopian. I think I use the word dystopian when I talk about things like that. But I know you're very, very busy, folks. Is there anything that our membership can do to get in behind you, to support you, to help you on your way in this very, very important and critical endeavor?
Well, if I could just ask everyone to mark their calendars, September 8th, 9th, 10th, and 11th.
Yeah.
You'll be able to watch it live at allisoninquiry.com, starting at 8:30 a.m. Eastern. Hopefully, if we're a little late, just forgive us. We're not that I'm ever late, right, Dean? So
First day, we may have to work on.
First day, we might have a few bugs.
We got a lot of things to move.
We're a lot of
Okay.
moving parts,
Yeah.
and consider donating. We're the COVID testimony. It's actually it's not actually a government inquiry.
No, you're funding this. Yeah.
We're funding
Okay.
this ourselves. It's citizen run, citizen funded, citizen organized.
Okay.
And tell people to tell people. This is a message I had a while back, that it's no longer sufficient for us to just gather this information ourselves within our safe circles and share it within our own safe circles. We now have to, like Dean mentioned, we have to give people permission to speak about this.
Yes.
So tell people about the Allison Inquiry. Tell them that we have over 40, 45, 50 witnesses coming to Ottawa. Wheelchairs, walkers, and IV poles. These are people that are desperate to share their stories. The least we can do is listen.
I can assure you, Teresa, that we're here at C3RF. We're committed to covering the testimony, and I have a kind of a newsletter, an update, I call it. I get it out on a regular basis to our tens of thousands across the country, and we'll be spending more than a little time on that, looking at those testimonies. So,
well, and you should come if you want to come and attend as a podcaster. The invitation is there, so we can talk offline about that, because we want this to be streamed on every single channel, and
Yes.
the mainstream media is picking it up because it's actually too big now for them to avoid. The only
Exactly.
thing I would correct on what it was that you said, with all due respect, you said that this may break the dam. I would actually correct you. I would say actually the dam has actually already broken. I think we're at this stage now. If Sean and I and if Dean's all stepped back, the snowball has already been pushed down the coulee.
Okay. I like that. I like that, and I do not mind being corrected. Dean, how about yourself? Anything last word for our audience?
Yeah, I'm gonna say the same thing that Teresa. I think it's important to share this information. I think the reality is, as more and more people come forward, and this was Teresa and Sean that originally said, the yoga moms that are at natural health food stores are having conversations about how things don't add up. What we're trying to do is help people connect the dots. And like I said, you can't connect any dots. People cannot get healed. People cannot get treatment if, one, doctors can't talk about it, and two, you can't talk about it yourselves to your neighbors, your friends, and your family. So we are just, we hope and pray is that people will feel comfortable to have these conversations either with their doctors, that other doctors will have conversations with their doctors, the media. The reality is, Russ, and I'm telling you right now that I know members of parliament, I know senators, I know media personalities, I know doctors, I know someone from every walk of life that has been injured and yet does not feel comfortable coming forward and sharing their stories for a variety of different reasons. And that's okay. What we're trying to do is give them permission. What we're trying to do is encourage them. What we're trying to do is say, you know what, can you imagine if everybody came forward and started sharing their stories about where they're at? And people started saying, wow, I had no idea. I had no idea whatsoever. And so I think that's part of that snowball as it continues down the hill that Teresa talked about. We want people to start connecting the dots, people to start understanding what's going on, because that's the only way they can get healing. We need them to have emotional healing because they've been gaslit and they've been abandoned. The word that keeps coming up with this, people feel like they've been abandoned. But after that, we need them to get treatment. They got to figure out a way, if there's a way that we can do that. If we can't, if everyone shows up to doctors and they refer to you to 30 specialists and none of them have got a clue how to fix you or direct you or put you in a direction, it's because the medical establishment's not talking about it. The reason there's no protocols to fix that in the medical establishment is because they refuse to exist they refuse to admit that it exists. And that is why we need to have these conversations. Because if these conversations don't start, we all suffer in silence, we all suffer in isolation, and then what happens when we show up, someone is recommending MAID from the medical community. That to me is completely unacceptable.
No.
Many people have died and have not, have died alone, not knowing or understanding. We have got to get people having these conversations.
No, that's not the Canadian way. That's not the Canadian way at all. And not being able to talk is not the Canadian way either. It's, like Teresa says, the snowball is on its way down the coulee here, and good. Thank the Lord for that. But what a scintillating conversation. I've really enjoyed this, Dean and Teresa, and C3RF is wishing you all the luck in this enterprise. We're going to be following it very, very closely. And I'd like to thank you once again for doing what you're doing and standing up for basically being able to speak your mind in Canada. What a concept. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thanks so much for having us on the show. We really appreciate it.
I really enjoyed it.